10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Good luck, studio.
Hello.
It's the Shy Life Podcast.
All I wanted was a pie, and then I hatched out of an egg.
Okay, bring the mic over. He's ready to record.
Hello. It's the quiet ones you've got to watch, you know.
Is it metaphorical? Is it deep? Is it deep?
Boy, he said all that shy is right.
Blimey, Governor, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
Excellent.
617. Bonjour et bienvenue au podcast The Shy Life.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shy Life Podcast with me, Paul the Shy Yeti. How are you doing? I'm alright. So, what's this episode going to be about? Well, we've not done this sort of episode for a while, but this is probably our fourth or fifth sort of go at doing an episode on this theme. What theme, you may ask? Well, you know how we've done random word episodes where we pick a word or given a series of words, and it's usually an episode with Nick and I, and well, that's what we're doing again. Nick's here. Hi, Nick. Yeah, so we thought we'd do another random word episode and see what stories are generated. So let's run the theme music. When we come back, we'll be going all random on you. Nothing new. Okay, run that theme music.
Darling, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
Yes, but it's a positive thing, Paul. The High Life, the Shy Life.
You won't find a cast of characters like this everywhere.
Hello, Paul.
I'll go anywhere for a potato.
Delicious.
Hello, captains. How are you?
You quite like a big bang, don't you, Paul? Go Shy Yeti.
Oh, I haven't found out my secret. Yes, he has.
If you thought that was bad, just listen to this.
Yeah, I am strangely drawn to Yeti Uncle John's ankles as well.
But has the Shy Life Podcast slowed down? I don't think so.
It's all gooey and meaty. Yum, 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 yum.
Has anyone seen my hot sausage?
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait for it to begin.
It's the Shy Life Podcast.
I like that. Yeah.
Marvellous, Paul.
Hi there.
Okay, right. So, Nick,
Yes.
we should, we might as well just jump
Let's
jump
jump
yeah,
right in.
yeah, and get on with it. I think we'll probably start with, say, three different words, and you can pick one of them. So I'm going to do that. Right. We've got mirror, authorise, or drive. I mean, drive can be motivation as much as driving in a car or being driven somewhere. So, would you like to start, or shall I?
I'm going to go. It's one of the three.
Yeah, I mean, if you do have more than one.
I'm going to go for drive.
Yeah.
Now, it's well known that I don't drive. That's very much. I hate this phrase, but it's a life choice. One I get very ribbed about by Ali, who very much misses driving. I don't mind being. I get very, very nervous sometimes about sort of big motorways. But I do remember when my sister was young, even before I was born, there was this toy motor wheel with a steering rod, and I remember seeing the package, and it said, "Oh yeah, you'll drive like Daddy." And I've always maintained that I have driven like Daddy, i.e. not at all, because my dad never learned to drive. My granddad gave after one lesson. I'm not a family of prolific drivers, and I used to very it's very expensive. I'm not particularly interested. It's far too technical and dangerous. I mean, the electric car, once you get petrol out of cars, I think might not be as exciting, but I'll be a lot happier, I think, with electric cars, and they'll do better for the planet. But the other thing, the drives that are in my life are portable hard drives. Now, this is there's a bit of a play on words here, but for me, portable hard drives are the miracle of the age. One of my favourite technical things. If I had discovered them about 8 years earlier than I did, I would have been able to get cracking on the film, editing the films a lot better, because it's memory that is needed. And I, like yourself, I have several portable hard drives, and which we have backup and goodness knows what, but it really is a godsend. You know, I've got most of my all my videos ever on portable hard drives, and also, as we've discovered, we now know that the entire series of Sutton Park can go. Not only can the entire series of Sutton Park go on a hard drive, you can get more stuff on there, and some, you know, because of your other stuff and stuff we've shared as well. You know, stuff we've worked together on can also go on there. So. And they're getting smaller. I mean, my first one was about the size of a brick, maybe not as thick as a brick, but and you had to plug it into the mains. Whereas now, it's just a USB and away you go. And 2 terabytes, you know, could do loads. So drive, portable hard drive is my drive. That's how I drive, and that's how I will continue to drive, I think. So. Rather than on the roads.
I think I probably could have learned to drive when I was 17, but it was also around the time that I chose to have a video camera instead. And the thing is, for years, none of my main friends, you didn't drive, Harry didn't drive, later on Callum didn't drive. So I had friends who we could just get about on public transport. Or maybe someone like Tropy would come along in his car and take us somewhere. Or, my friend Paul from school, he drives now, but he didn't drive for a long time.
Absolutely. When we did the films, I was, you know, I'm not dishing drivers, but I was, you know, there was people like Tropy and various members of the cast that would drive us to locations.
I think particularly American listeners are always surprised that so many people don't necessarily drive or feel a need to drive in the UK. But I mean, there have been times when, more recently, well, I wish I had. I did consider it around the age of 40, although it's probably a little bit before then, because I had ill health around that age as well, so that would have put me off. But I know when I suggested sort of learning in my very late 30s, Harry was very concerned about that. And I know why, because he's quite competitive with me, but it's a very one-sided competition. It doesn't bother me. I don't look at things that he does and think, oh, I must do that. But there have been occasions where he definitely has, like, you know, he was very keen to start looking for buying property soon after I bought my flat, but then I'd been left some money in a will, so I had a deposit, so it was the obvious thing to do. When I said about learning to drive, he was very anti that, because I think he would have felt that he would have had to have learned to drive as well.
I think also, you know, with the lessons and everything, it's so dreadfully expensive, and they're expensive to maintain as well. I mean, I've seen firsthand, you know, how you can become a cropper with all the costs and things. I mean, I certainly couldn't afford it now, because you know, I'm helping out with Liam the rising costs of fuel as well. And
I do remember slightly later than when I was in my mid-40s, my partner at the time moved over to the UK, and they were able to drive, and I kind of hoped that they would continue to drive in the UK, because it would have made our life a lot more easy. But I was told quite adamantly there was no way they were going to be continuing to drive, because they hated driving. But it was a shame, because it was something they could have brought to the relationship different to things that I could bring to the relationship, and I think it would have. But there wasn't really ever any discussion about it. It just wasn't going to happen. So.
My girlfriend before Ali, we're going back about 25 years now, but she was the daughter of a driving instructor, and I, at that point, which was my late 20s, I thought, that's it then. I'm going to have to learn to drive, I suppose. I was pretty hard up then. So, but of course that only lasted about 4 months. So, one bound I was free. But I know Ali even now she needles me a bit about not driving. But I make no apologies, and especially in this day and age where your carbon footprint is a bit tricky in that respect. So, it's a choice. Yeah, it's a life choice, and I stick by it still. I
actually want to choose the word mirror out of those three, but it's okay to chip in if the other person chooses a word which you don't want to choose, but Absolutely. Which you have an anecdote for. Yeah. My mirror anecdote is very specific. It relates to, funnily enough, we've been digitising some tapes that my mum found in their house from the very early days of me making my videos, like late 91 into early 92, before Sutton Park. And I remember one of the things I made with my brother was, I guess it was the sequel to something called Dizzy that I'd done with our friends David and Vicky up in Tamworth, up north. When I came back and I had my own camera, I decided to make the next one, and basically involved my brother in a mask and with these tentacles, and had special effects that were mainly special effects with me. Usually meant bubble bath and talcum powder and any gloop that you could find in the bathroom. And I always remember there was a scene that I recorded in a mirror in my parents' bedroom where I was supposed to look up at the camera with all the gloop on my face. I don't know if it was supposed to be towards the end of the Dizzy or
I think I know the one you mean.
Yeah, and I kept corpsing. Yeah. It's funny how I always think of that because I can still remember the piece of music that I dubbed over the outtakes of me bursting into laughter in front of the mirror with all the gloop running down my face and everything. And it was left to my own devices. The Pet Shop Boys top 10 hit with one of my favourite Pet Shop Boys songs. And I think it was at the end. I think also it might have been at the end, because when I edited it into a Beaches episode, I wouldn't have necessarily finished the episode. If there was still some tape left at the end of the tape I was editing onto, I would have just kept on going until that tape ran out. Yeah. And I think I can almost remember the outtakes with the Pet Shop Boys song over the top.
I remember
running to the point where
what have I done to deserve this being dubbed onto the chase, like a chase when your brother had the tentacles.
Yeah, probably both of those tracks back to back. Of all of them, the things to associate with mirrors. We also did, later on in Sutton Park, we did a spoof on the film Candyman.
Yeah.
We had people saying, like, Sutton Park 4 times or 3 times, however many it was, into a mirror, and then some horrible face loomed out.
That's no way to talk about Danny.
Mirrors are always good for...
I always remember, mirror-wise, I think my association would be with filming too, because they were always a useful device when you were trying to get round a shot. And also when we did One More Bow, which is my sort of comedy ghost story, I needed to do a shot where Louise, who was playing with one of the girls, had to put her hand through something, and you had to go through. I think we didn't use. I think it was a big pane of glass. It didn't. The shot didn't work. I never used it in the end. But and also there was a shot where one of the live characters was talking into a mirror, and we had to make sure that he's doing a quote or something, and the ghost answers back. So we needed to make sure the ghost wasn't in shot. And also my very last film, well, the last film I produced and directed, Different Colour Graveyard, was shot in our friend's bedroom, and she was getting more and more, her character was getting more and more psychotic and cutting up clothes, and it was a very tight area to film in, and their wardrobe had mirrors. So I was absolutely, those mirrors were absolutely invaluable, because you could get all the shot you wanted, because you were using the mirrors rather than what was immediately in front of you. So yes, I'm all in favour of mirrors, especially obviously there can be a bit of a bind. I think when we did Retaliators with that David Aldridge, I could make the first week but not the second week, and Elaine had the opposite problem. And so I couldn't do any of my scenes with her. And there's one scene, I think, when we're in the front room, I'm stood up in view of the mirror, and there's a shot of Elaine with the mirror in the background, and I'm not there. So there is a shot in that where I'm a vampire, because my reflection can't be seen. So yeah, I mean, mirrors can trip you up, but they're useful to increase the depth of a shot.
Because I was there for both of those weeks, so I think I was probably used as a sort of, at times, I appeared with both of you to make it look like it was, they were just off shots sort of thing. Yeah. Which is funny, the last episode of Neighbours that's just recently been screened, Kylie and Jason were only on set for one afternoon and didn't appear with the main cast. That they never actually met the character played by Guy Pearce, although they really looked like that they had, because Stefan Dennis and Ian Smith, who plays Harold, and Annie Jones, who plays Jane, were there both days, so they kind of made it look as best.
Was Kylie and Jason still married in the story?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah.
Stuff from Charlene, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off.
Anyway, we should probably choose some more random words. Right, I'll go for 3 again. I can give you 3, and you can say stay or throw back. We probably shouldn't do this every time, but I've got 3 words. I don't really think that they're that great. Trustee, physics, or culture. Keep or throw.
Funny enough, I'm going to keep physics.
Okay, we'll keep. Well, if we're keeping, we're keeping. So, you do physics.
Okay. Physics. I think. I mean, I'm not going to be talking for hours on this, but I remember we did, obviously, when at school, in the first, I don't know what you call it now, but in the first and second year at senior school, secondary school, should I say, we just did science. It was just called science, and then in the third year they chopped science up. And you chopped it up into 4, I think. So you had chemistry, biology, physics, and applied science. Quite what applied science means, I haven't the faintest idea, but that's
Mr. Trowbridge.
Yeah, Mr. Trowbridge, if you could let us know what that's all about. But of those, I found the most interesting to be physics, because you had, the sort of, it just seemed to be, it was more complicated, but it was very interesting, and some of the practical stuff was good, and I actually did ask if I could do physics, and I was turned down because my maths wasn't good enough. Now, I've had various people over the years say, what's that got to do with it? And probably quite rightly so. The other thing, although not from a practical point of view, the other thing I could have brought to the table, had I been allowed to do physics, is I could have actually been a good ally for the teacher, who was a rather neurotic young man with a beard who was constantly picked on by the pupils, known universally as Beard, not the most original nickname you could ever imagine, but he was known for probably a couple of generations of pupils as Beard, and he was rather a sensitive young fella and very easily wound up. So I don't think I was a bit of a swot well, not a swot, but I was a goody-goody in that respect, because I never really wound up the teachers, even the ones that deserved it. So I could have actually made his physics classes a little more bearable for him.
Yeah, I think I agree. I don't think I would ever have goaded those teachers. I was more concerned that the class would get detention, then we'd have to stay back after to school, and then because I had to get a bus home, and then I'd be late home for tea, or I'd miss neighbours.
Yeah.
It wasn't worth mucking around, and also I can't say I particularly cared for many of the ones who would be mean to a teacher.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to get class attention for them.
Exactly. And I like Mr. Lee, he was called. I liked him. I felt sorry for him. I thought. He wasn't the most scintillating teacher you can ever imagine, and that's why they walked over him. But I actually thought he was okay. And maybe there were certain concepts I wouldn't have been able to grasp, but I would have liked to have had a go. I didn't. In the end, I was stuck with applied science. I didn't want to do chemistry because it was incredibly messy, or biology because the teacher was a complete twat. It was. Yeah, I would have liked to have had a crack at it. It was stuff I was interested in.
Our form tutor in the 6th year, who was much better at chatting than he was at... he was okay as an English teacher.
Yeah.
As a history teacher, he just chatted, and then he expected you to catch up after class. And I was looking back to see if there were any teachers I recognised the name of, 5 or so years ago, and I was shocked of all the teachers from my time that were still there. That one who was a fun enough teacher to have as a distraction, but did no good as far as when I was doing my. I needed a good teacher to help me with history, because we had 2 history teachers for different parts of our A level.
Yeah,
and it meant that one half of my A level was quite strong, and the other half was not strong, because I was having to try and do it myself. And what's the point of going to school if you're just going to learn it all from a book with no tutorial?
Yeah.
So I was really shocked that he lasted in teaching, because I thought if he was going to be...
There's quite a few. We were amazed they lasted in teaching. 2 other memories actually of that is I remember the first lesson we had in physics in would have been the 3rd year, and we sort of all packed up, and after the first lesson I remember Gary Price, who's now Clerk of Works at the cathedral, turning to his comrades and saying, "Physics is rubbish." Quite what the rationale behind that was, I don't know, but physics is one of those things I could cheerfully go back and study now, but there would be absolutely no point whatsoever, because my professional career is hardwired into admin now. But I technologically I'm a lot more savvy. I'm a lot more with it when things get changed, and I'm a lot more evangelical about getting new technology, getting consultants to use new technology.
I wasn't good enough at science to even at GCSE to even do for physics, chemistry, biology. Yeah, we didn't seem to have applied science. Not as a separate thing.
Applied appears to have been a mishmash of all of them. Well, for the dumb kids.
When it came to my GCSEs, I just did a general science. It might even have been. I think it was the same with maths.
Yeah.
I was. The teacher said, "Would it be okay if I was in the bottom set for maths?"
So was I.
Because they knew that I would work. I was probably good enough to be in the however many sets, say there was 3, I was probably good enough to be in the middle set, but there were people in the bottom set who would just muck about.
Oh, yeah.
And then they would, whereas if they were in the middle set, they'd have to work and it would push them to do better. Whereas they thought I would just get on with it wherever cast I was.
Funny you should say that. Exactly the same thing happened to me. I was by the 5th year, I was put down for the bottom set for maths. But like yourself, I knew, because I'd been there, it would be full of people, as you say, just mucking. The remedials just mucking about and not really wanting to learn. There was a particularly naff teacher that used to teach me French who would be doing that, and I thought, no, I'm not going to learn anything from this. And funny enough, I actually put my foot down and said, can't I stay with Mr. Owen's set, which is second from bottom, because I really don't think this is for me. And I'm looking back, I'm amazed I had the balls to do that, because, you know, it's not in my nature to kick up a fuss.
There were 1 or 2 people, perhaps there were some that they moved to a higher set to keep an eye on them, but then perhaps there were 1 or 2 who were just hopeless wherever they were, because there were a couple of people who just didn't. But the maths teacher was quite good really, and I think she just kind of, the ones of us who wanted to work sat near the front, and she kind of just, it was like she was teaching us, and just if the other 1 or 2 wanted to muck about, but then perhaps that stopped them a bit, because when they realised the whole class was messing about.
This is the problem.
Eventually,
I was always stuck with the messing around us, and I didn't want to mess around. I wanted to get on with it. I mean, I was actually turned down for 2 subjects in school. One of them was physics, of course, and the other was RE. I would have gladly thrown one of the other subjects under the wheels to have done RE, but I'm the only person who wanted to do it. And also the teacher, Mr. Martin, was one I admired very much. He was creative. He'd written musicals for the school, and he had the sort of quirky personality of almost had a 70s TV presenter type personality.
So there was a point where I hadn't started to question being brought up with the church, but I don't think, given the choice to stay in bed or go to church, I would always rather have stayed in bed, because I was at a school where Sunday mornings were my only lie-in, and which is eventually why I stopped being made to go to church. But I still did quite well in my exams for GCSEs at religious studies, and I quite liked it because half of it, I was good at English literature, but I didn't really enjoy it. Didn't enjoy the text, but at least I knew that studying half of religious studies was you're studying a book of the Bible. So so it could be a book of the Bible, could be a Dickens. You're still being asked questions, or being asked to write about the theme of something in this. And the other half of it at GCSE, which was quite interesting, was issues like abortion or euthanasia, which was shows how you were kind of presumed that you would know. Because I remember because our RE teacher was the vicar or the reverend of the school. He was a practicing preacher, and I remember him talking about euthanasia, and we all thought, well, certainly more than just me, thought that he'd said euthanasia. It was surprising in a way to expect 15 or 16-year-olds to know what euthanasia meant.
Absolutely, I didn't know I still didn't know what euthanasia meant when I was 19. I was at Smike with Danny and the gang at that point. That's where I met Danny, and he was at Bishop's, and also at Bishop's was the lead brains of Smike, Neil Smith, and he led the subject for it was a church discussion group, and he led one of the subjects, and sure enough it was euthanasia, and I was very much kind of, I will keep my mouth shut and my ears open, because I didn't know what it was, and it was then that I learned what it was. But I was 19, nearly 20 at the time.
But I did quite well in GCSE religious studies because I could do the questions on the particular biblical text that we'd been studying for the exams, okay, and I also could enjoy writing about the issues. I think I was a lot more uninformed, or a lot more sort of, I wouldn't have the same views about, say, abortion as I did when I was 15. I think I probably felt sorry for all of the poor babies being killed, sort of thing, without really thinking about the woman's part of it, and I don't think I would. I think, but you know, that's
it's
the thing.
Incredibly thorny and difficult,
especially when you're that young. You go much more for sort of, it's this, it's that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one for us because there's 101 scenarios about that, but Ali and I are sort of very much pro-lifers, so we're kind of it's a tricky one for us. But I mean, going back to physics, my other memory of physics is, I think it was during one of the physics classes, Basili, in one of his more passionate moments in terms of teaching, and it was a sort of uncharacteristically charismatic moment. He wrote on large letters on the board, "No suction ever," and he underlined it. And he was saying that there was actually no such thing as suction, but it was all pressure. Which just another word for suction, really. But I just remember that sort of memory leaps out at me.
I think physics was probably my middle favourite science.
Yeah.
Biology was my least favourite, and I managed to avoid anything. I don't know how I managed to avoid having to cut anything up.
Yes, those were in the days, listeners, when it was commonplace to do
dissection.
A dead animal to be dissected in class.
But I imagine it was similar in the States, because I'm sure I've seen TV programmes where they... But I somehow managed to avoid that.
I actually did sit on one... there was a few that sort of revelled in it, and a few... Not the ones you'd expect either. Some of the more hard nuts would actually not find it, would almost puke. I didn't find it very pleasant, but I stuck with it. But physics, I wouldn't have minded biology. Certainly, I think in theory, I don't think probably cutting things up would have been very nice. But if I'd had a better teacher,
I think chemistry was the one I liked best, because I liked sort of when you had to make crystals out of things, or you mix this thing with that thing and it made this thing, or there was some smoke. Or
I think chemistry was my least favourite, because of the class I was with, it was by that, and it was the third year, they were getting very larky and sarky and messy, and with the chemicals, you never quite know what, if you got it wrong, it might go in your face. And again, the science department was a little wanting in decent teachers. But it was interesting. Look, it's only I've not thought about it much actually, but I mean, and these days, if I was still at school now with the brain I've got now, I'd be quite horrified to find myself in school, of course, but and if I knew I was going to do something with it, I would have actually probably done.
I had a dream the other night, which has nothing to do with what we're talking about. I think it was you and I, and Eric Morecambe and Ernie Wise were somehow impressed by something we'd written, and I was working in some military, more like a museum than a library, and I think Ernie had popped in because he was quite interested, probably having been in the war. He was interested. I don't think until he told me that I had seen when he'd come in. But I remember the entrance hall to this museum. It was all quite sort of. You had to squeeze your way through some turn. I knew we were supposed to be meeting them, and I didn't know if they'd already come in, and they were coming out as I was. And it was definitely you and I. But I said to my mum the next day, it would be rather strange that I would be working in a museum and that we'd have done writing when Eric Morecambe died in 1984. So I was still at school when he died, and
so was I. Even I was at school when he died.
And Ernie Wise died in the late 90s. Where he was more likely to have read something. Well, not that he would have done. It wasn't more likely at all. But there was more chance physically that there were things going around by that point.
What a lovely dream! I'm always pleased when I turn up in people's dreams, but I'm also a little bit worried about my behaviour in them. I'm always afraid of. I'm always worried about behaving. And although in actual fact, if I heard I've misbehaved,
they seem really nice as well, which was nice.
Yeah.
Grandfatherly.
Nice to impress them. I had a dream the other day that this is going off the subject a bit, but Gary Downey, who was the PA and partner to John Nathan Turner, who was producer of Doctor Who in the 80s. He turned up after my mum died. He turned up and went through her videos to see if there was any potential Doctor Who material that they could put in the DVDs. And
very clever, considering that he was dead before your mum was dead.
Considerably. I mean, there's Gary Downey went 14 years before my mum, but I just love. The one thing I adore about dreams is its total disregard for chronology and the fact that people people long since dead just turn up when they feel like it. And I love that. I love all that thing about dreams. I really do.
Before we go on to another random word, I want to try an experiment. This could go really badly wrong, but I noticed that when I was setting this up, because I'm picking the random words off from my phone, and there is not only is there random words, I'm scared about this. I don't know if this is going to work at all. There's for some reason randomly. Well, I just don't know if this is going to work at all. It allows us a bit of creativity. There's an option for fake words that don't exist at all. Actually, I might generate more than one, and then we can pick one of them. I think,
so is this slightly different?
This is just a break in the random words.
Yeah.
I'm going to generate 5 make-believe words, and pick one and tell me what you have decided it means. As I say, could go badly wrong, but I'm going to generate 5 words and see if it inspires us to creatively invent a new word. Shakespeare was doing it all the time. There's no reason why you and I shouldn't invent a word. Oh my goodness, I don't know if I can pronounce this. Oh, for goodness. No, I can't do these. Well, I'll try, but it's very difficult to pronounce this one. One of the words is Mode Carlia Ling. One is Globsomil. One is Karina. One is Oceansons, and one is In Kinder.
Richard Todd was in Kinder.
Yeah.
God, I haven't heard any of those.
Well, they don't exist.
What are we supposed to be doing?
We're supposed to be coming up with a definition for one of those words, which is perfectly fine. The words don't exist. You are like getting to christen that word.
Oh, right. What were they again?
Mode Carlialing, Globsomil, Curina, Oceansons, and In Kinder. I've come up with one last when I've been talking, so do you want me to do mine first?
I would say Globsomil sounds like some fluid created by the body, internal organs. Globsomil. Substance created in the stomach or something.
I guess this is a bit like the opposite. This is a bit like when I do Call My Bluff, where you make up a false. Well, in this case, it doesn't matter because the word doesn't exist. But yeah, I was thinking that Globsomil might be. I was thinking of liquids, but I was thinking in a beehive.
Oh, right.
A particular type of bee that, aside from the worker bees, aside from the queen bee, there's a particular other type of bee that is the only one to produce Globsomil, which is a very intrinsic part of the.
Is that what it's saying now?
Well, no, because it doesn't. There is no. That these words don't exist. So we are christening them. No, but I when I saw Globstermeal, that's what came to me in the same way as you were thinking something with bodily fluids. We'll try one more towards the end of the show. It maybe as a extra material at the end of the show.
Karina, that's quite a pretty name, obviously because it's a woman's name, but maybe a sort of a section of a garden, a landscape garden, really ornate, almost, or not oriental, but kind of a sealed off part of a garden that is for quiet time.
The park I used to go to that was opposite my work, where you had to have a key, there was a garden within a garden. Maybe the Curina was that inner garden within the garden.
Inner garden,
yeah.
Sanctum, yes.
A sort of quiet place for thoughtful.
A secret garden, an actual name for a secret garden. So.
I think we could get into this. It's just getting used to training your mind to
the fact that it's 4 or so words, and you're kind of trying to get your head around just one. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could just do one, but I thought if we get a really rubbish one, then
we're both creative writers. We can make something of it.
It didn't help that first go that I got a word that was like.
I think 4 is way too much. I think.
I was just trying to provide options, but I think we'll try again later in the episode and do it again.
That's nice. That's a really nice little.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's a nice creative.
Well, let's try what because that was like a run up. Let's try what three option, an option of 3 choices, like we have been doing with the random words. So, I'm not doing that. One of them's too short. Oh, for goodness sake, I have to pronounce these things. I'm keeping going until I can pronounce. I quite like that one. Mm-hmm. Well, there's 3. I've cheated, listeners, and I've skipped through a few that I don't even know where to start. But these ones. Well, the first one I'm not sure about. The first fake word is XU.
XU, just the letters XU.
XU. I mean, probably in some countries that probably is a word. The other word is avention, and the third option is Hubblepup. Exu, avention, or Hubblepup.
XU or XU.
Well, XU. However you want to pronounce it, really, it's your word.
I think XU sounds a little bit like a buzzword of the time for self-improvement. Like sort of if you've kind of tried to lose weight or you've got drug addiction or something, it's like what you would describe, a kind of I'm so XU, kind of, that's over and done with now. I'm a new person. So almost in a slang rather than an official word. Sort of, maybe American, maybe from America. XU. You've got to get XU. Maybe even a help group.
Mm-hmm.
XU makes you become a better person.
I think Hubblepup comes from it was the nickname, but it became a name in its own right, a word in its own right. It was a name for, particularly with cats, if there was a litter of cats or cats that were brought up in a family or on a farm where there were dogs as well, and they showed sort of doggy traits, so they were known as Hubblepups. I mean, Dealey has certain traits that he often goes to the front door when the postman comes, and not something he doesn't bring the letters back like a dog would, perhaps, but he does have some doggy traits, although Dealey's never met a dog in his life. But I think Hubblepup was a sort of the word that was used by farmers for animals who kind of it showed, as I say, particularly with cats, but
or maybe in reference to the Hubble telescope in space, those in space working the Hubble telescope who were novice ones. They've only started out in the space business, and you gain a certain degree. Then you go up in space, and you're a Hubble pup. You're starting out, and then and then you could become a Hubble hound or something.
Right. Let's go back to random words. We'll try another fake word at the end.
They're more fun than I was expecting, actually, I must admit.
Yeah. Okay, we've got 3 random words. We've got stimulation, careful, down boy, deviation, or pride.
Oh, the first one I'll discount because I can go into very dangerous territory. Very dangerous and very personal territory.
So you want to deviate stimulation?
So I
deviate.
Stimulation.
Yes, you want to deviate.
I can. That's probably best left to when this goes off. Deviation, I think, it doesn't need to be moral deviation, although I've known a bit of that in my time. But deviation from the point. I mean, I'm always doing that. I've always done that. If I go into a subject, I'll switch subjects in midstream because I'm always afraid that I'm going to. Oh, that's good. I'll forget about that if I don't actually grab it now. And that, of course, formed the inspiration for Professor Maxwell Cunningham in Andy's film Child of Anubis, where he based the professor character on me, and it was really weird because I had to play a sort of almost like a cartoon version of myself, which is incredibly more difficult than you can imagine. But because he changed the subject and flitted around and everything, and just like I do. But yes, I have always deviated from the subject. I've always endeavoured to come back to it.
I always find I've learned probably more, even more so since I've been doing the podcast. My mouth is sometimes a little bit behind my brain.
Oh, I can vouch for that. I've always found that.
So when I've been podcasting, my sentences trail off because I feel like I've already finished that sentence.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually finished that sentence. Not as far as podcasting would be.
Yes. I've long maintained that your brain works faster than your mouth. You've sometimes. You kind of on Sutton Park particularly, and if you're presenting, sometimes you always start with a bit of a babble because the brain is kind of like, give it, come on quickly now, you kind of want to get there, and also I've noticed I have a nervous habit of starting a pointless end sentence. Pointless beginning sentence which just repeats the previous one and sort of leaving it in the air. Or sort of, there's things to that of that ilk.
The good thing about doing editing is that I think I have improved. Listeners, you'll be thinking, you've improved some of these conversations, but believe me, some of the things where we've either stuttered or not just me, all of us. If I can, I try and improve. I try and make it sound better than we sounded when we recorded. So yeah, it's quite nice sometimes when it really works. I kind of think, wow, that actually sounds like
you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and if you consider that somewhere in the middle of that was a load of ums and ers and correcting ourselves and saying the wrong thing, and actually now it just sounds like we got it right first time. So the wonders of editing.
When I did the Magnet Memories book and I interviewed Joe, when I edited those conversations, I edited myself out because I'm not actually saying, unless there's something relevant to the flow of the conversation, I edited all the bits and it out that were mine. And it's the editing. There was just a few bits where it just overlapped, and there's one or two bits where I'm actually a little bit not kicking off the mark. And it looks like there's a 10-minute conversation where I'm desperately trying to get a word in edgeways, and Joe's just going blah 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 blah, because there's a sort of a draw of a breath somewhere, or the end of a conversation. It just looks like I'm desperately trying to get a word in edgeways. So that was quite funny. It's quite funny what you can do with editing.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about Pride, and specifically the various different gay prides that I've been, which when I used to go were rarer than they are today. Most towns seem to have a Pride celebration, but I first went probably in the very late 90s or early noughties, and it was the London Prides were the ones that people talked about. Maybe Brighton Pride, which I've never ever been to.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
we were in Brighton one year, and I think we were there for just a overnight break, and we were in the streets, and there was Pride.
I don't know why I never got to Brighton Pride. I've been to Manchester Pride, I think. But the London Pride was the one I went to the most often, and each year they seem to have got a different walk, or maybe from Hyde Park to... It used to peter out around Victoria when I used to do it, quite near a Pizza Hut. Yeah. So it was usually Harry and I that would go, and we'd rush into Pizza Hut afterwards. But over the years they kind of made it more and more corporate, and it used to be you could just, whoever you were, wherever you were on the LGBT scale, if you were an ally, anywhere, you could just join the march, join the parade, celebrate, blow a whistle, usually blow a whistle when you got outside number 10. No matter who is in power, they're never doing as much as they should be. Some do more, some do less. But,
what, for gay rights, or?
Yeah, and for rights in general. But because, of course, it includes
I've always
women's rights, because you've got gay women.
Absolutely. But what I've never quite got is, I think there's a certain misconception as to who Pride is for. I mean, a straight person can go on Pride, couldn't they? Yeah,
but it's come a lot more about watching. I wasn't really that interested in watching. I'm not interested in standing in the same place for hours watching lots of floats go by.
No.
Which would have been interesting, because you would have seen a lot of... But just standing, it's a bit too passive for me. I'm much more of a take-a-parter than taking part.
Take the part.
Than an observer. I don't want to watch a TV programme. Well, I do, but I want to go out there and make a TV programme. Or I don't want to listen to a podcast. I do want to listen to a podcast, but I also want to go and make my own. There's so much a balance between being an observer and being a participator.
Yeah.
And too long being too long being an observer, and I get itchy feet and want to go and do it myself.
I feel that about one of the reasons I don't go and see my friends in studio theatre very much when they're on shows is I'll go and see the show and instantly wish I'd gone up for it and I was working with those people. I would get terribly envious and wistful about not being part of it.
But it used to be fun, like Harry and I, or maybe one or two other friends, joining the march, and sometimes you'd overtake some of the floats, sometimes you'd... it was great being on the actual street. Also walking on the streets of London, where usually you wouldn't... There'd be cars or buses, or it was quite a blast that the whole road would be turned over and you had the freedom of the city to a certain extent. And it was really good not having to have a reason or a particular cause within a cause to be... The more time went on, they really wanted to be marching with, I don't know, Pimlico over 32s.
Yeah. The outgoing mayor of Salisbury, Caroline Corbyn, was a great advocate for Pride and gay rights, because she is, although she's straight herself, she was she did get Pride up and running. Was it 20? It was either 2000 and I think it was about 2016. Salisbury had its own Pride March, and that was right through into through the Maltings and everything. Ali went. I wasn't able to make it, but yeah. So
I really like taking part when they didn't sort of say, oh, you have to be civil service gay society, or you had to be marching for gay accountants, or you had to be, Harry and I wanted to march together. We didn't want to be split apart in different.
If anything, that's really self-defeating, because the whole point of Pride is knocking down barriers. And if you're going to put up barriers that say, you can only have gay accountants.
The days when we were going, it was probably been going since the 70s, but it got increasingly corporate and increasingly, I remember they used to have a festival or bands. Sometimes it would be somewhere very central. And then one year we went to somewhere near Stratford, and you got to Stratford. It must have been about an hour's walk from Stratford out to some field in the middle of nowhere. It was, on a hot summer's day, it was like, on the map from Stratford, they make it look like it was just around the corner, but it was around the corner, over a motorway bridge, it was a long old trek. But I got to see Human League, but after that I didn't always go to those, because it was a bit much, a bit in the middle of nowhere. And then you're sort of also tied to paying expensive prices for drink, or having to queue for ages. Or I think I probably petered out somewhere in the noughties. Going, maybe.
I remember there was one Pride we went to in London, and Harry, I don't think we went on the march, but Harry and somebody else and you and I had a picnic in I remember on a very, very hot day in the middle of London, and I remember nipping over to the shop. I can't remember where Ali was or whether she was with us, but I remember nipping over to the shop to get something.
I certainly got to the stage where I perhaps because I was dating people and we weren't necessarily around, or we were when I was with Neff, we used to spend most of our weekends going off for European jaunts for long weekends, and I don't think that when I went out with Kirk that he was necessarily that bothered about going to Pride, because it was very busy and crowded and expensive. And well, that said, the last time I went on a Pride march was, I think I found the photo recently, around 2014, I think, and I went with Kirk, but that was, by that point, you really had to kind of be marching with I think maybe he was with Kirk, and I was no longer dating, but we were friends, and I think maybe he'd been helping on some sort of local gay helpline near the area he lived. So we were parading under a banner for that helpline. But I don't think I would have been allowed to have gone, just as unless you managed to jump over a fence when nobody's watching. So that was the last time I did it, and as under a particular banner. But it was quite different from how it had been, say, 14 years earlier, where you could just join the crowd. You could either watch or you could take part. Random word, and then we'll have to say goodbye to the listeners probably, and then we'll do a couple more fake words at the end. We've got ghostwriter, high, and beneficiary. Obviously, I'm a writer who's written about a lot.
High,
about
is that
of
sort of high as in
could
high
be
up or high?
Could be. It could. It's HIGH.
Or high. Well, I'd probably go for high, actually, because I've always been afraid of heights. Jumping out of an aeroplane was probably my idea of vision of hell. And although there are things I've no objections to going up quite high, as long as it's stable. Of course, as you know, I've been an aeroplane, but I think things like the Walk of Faith, which was the Blackpool Tower. I went on Blackpool Tower, and there's a very solid glass plate where you can actually step on it, and there's hundreds of feet below is But yeah, so I think that's quite good. You know, and also most notably my such is my fear of heights. If it's done well in a certain angle, even watching heights on telly, my palms will sweat. There's particularly in there's a scene in the Auf Wiedersehen Pet, this series that they did in the 80s, revived in the noughties, and there's a scene in the 2002 one set in Arizona. They go to Vegas, and one of the boys, I think Jimmy Nail, goes up and they're in the lift, and one of the characters can't even look, you know, because we know how high up Vegas is, and they're trying to persuade one of the Native American workers to come and work with them on a bridge project, and this guy is working miles in the air on one of the very high Vegas points, and he's on this metal bar which is part of the structure he's working on, and he's having his sandwiches on the edge. Now, it makes my palms sweat talking about it, and even though it was all blue screen and you know they weren't really in danger, it was such a frightening sequence. And to prove himself, one of Jimmy Nail's character actually goes onto and inches his way towards this guy to persuade him, and wins his respect by doing this. I wouldn't win his respect myself. I'd kind of oh no.
Yeah, I don't think I wouldn't do bungee jumping. I certainly wouldn't jump out of an airplane. I've been up near the top of Salisbury Cathedral, but even then I don't think, certainly not to the point where you were climbing outside.
I wouldn't rule it out, but I think there would be a certain point where I don't go beyond.
I think a lot of these things, it's better to do it when you're younger, because I think my dad, probably being a chartered surveyor and an estate agent, taking people around houses, I'm sure he has been up tallish buildings at different times, but I think he's probably got more of a fear of heights than he had when he was working.
I remember when I was a security guard, I was working at the Salisbury College, the old part of the building, and I had at one point, I've no idea why, I've long since forgotten why, I had to go up on the roof, and I think it was a flat roof. There was no problem with the roof, but actually getting up to the roof, there was a totally vertical ladder, which had seen better days, and a hatch with a very heavy lip round it. Mm-hmm. And I did have a problem with that, I must admit. I've had enormous trouble getting up. I think I even radioed in saying I can't get down. You know, the lip's too big. I can't actually safely get down, and I think they must have talked me down at some point, but it really was a compromised position. I wasn't happy doing it.
I'm going to approach this word from a different way. I'm going to do high, but I'm going to answer the question: has Shy Yeti ever been high? As in high? And the answer is yes, but I'm probably one of the most prudish people about drugs, not for other people to do, but I just didn't hang out, and Nick is here with me, he can vouch for me.
Oh, yeah.
We like alcohol, but we weren't a druggy group.
That's very true.
And so I didn't have people saying, go on, do it, try it, whatever, even though I had older friends. So I got all the way through my 20s, pretty much. I think that would be fair. I was offered a cigarette at when I graduated in 95. I didn't have my graduation until 96. By which time, and also Kerry from my course, who was my only real friend on the course by the end, he wasn't going to his graduation. I was actually back in Birmingham working a job after university, and I made friends with somebody who lived in the same house as me, and it happened to be his housewarming party the same weekend as my graduation. So although there was no graduation parties going on that I was aware of, or nobody had told me, I was going to a housewarming party. So that was nice. Couldn't have been better timing. I got to have a party So my parents came up, went to graduation, and they left, and I went over to the party. At that party, later, at some point in the evening, somebody started handing around a cigarette. And, of course, I'm the first person who gets handed it. And I thought, well, the thing is, I don't even know how to smoke a cigarette, let alone a spliff. I'm going to look stupid. Is it better to take it and look stupid, or just say no thanks and pass it on? So I took it and said no thanks and passed it on. And the next person did the same thing, and the next person did the same thing, and I was really shocked because I thought I'd be the square one who hadn't taken the spliff. And in fact, I think everybody else probably was a little bit nervous because it was quite eye-opening, quite surprising. I don't know if they just did it. I don't know why they didn't take it, but anyway. And then the next notable time, it's something that only ever really crosses my path very occasionally these days. But my friend from university, we fell out a bit, and then 5 years later we got back in touch, and he quit drinking, but he smoked occasionally, and it was a bit of a bonding thing. It was kind of like, well, as it's him, sure, if he wants me to do it, then I'll do it. So that's the first time I definitely smoked a spliff in the very early noughties. And it was a bit of a very occasional thing. And then in the mid-noughties, when my partner at the time, he liked going to Amsterdam, I would go with him, and then he'd buy something and I'd take the odd puff. But then in Amsterdam it's allowed anyway, so it's no big deal. The funniest time was, though, as I say, I was never really into it. It's never something I've sought out independently. It's always quite interesting. I was talking to a friend recently, like, I'm not saying I want to know this because I want to go and do it, but I'm just intrigued. What do you do? Do you stand on a street corner? Do you know somebody who knows somebody? And I think in this case, his friend knew somebody, and they would call this person. They'd go and meet, and it was all very as you'd expect, kind of. But there was this time in Amsterdam where I was with Neff, and as I say, we went to a bar, and he'd be smoking. He could smoke. I mean, even the occasional times I have had a spliff, I don't know that I'm smoking properly. I'm probably getting something. I'm probably inhaling something. Probably getting some. I think I probably, definitely when I used to go with my university friend, I definitely felt because we weren't drinking, so I knew that to me I felt almost the same as I would do after, say, 3 or 4 pints. So I knew that it wasn't alcohol. There was nothing else I'd had other than that. So I knew I must have been doing something right. But I'm not a confident smoker or convinced that I'm doing it properly.
The thing is, I mean, I'm known as a pro-smoking non-smoker. Yeah. And I champion people that still smoke. I mean, there seems to be this popular myth within the people that make the rules that smoking's on the way out. It's not. Half my colleagues smoke, and I don't like the idea that this life choice that is still very much, is they're being marginalised simply because the moral high ground, kind of say, yeah, I mean, you should contain it, you should keep your own kids or whatever. But the thing is, I've not actually. It's going back to what you said about, am I doing this right? I've never got it right, and the few times I haven't done it many times, but the few times I have done it, I've got it wrong. But I've smoked on stage, and my friend from work, Maria, who understands my psyche very well, and I like going out with smokers. I like because it gets away from the pub, a bit of fresh air, in inverted commas, and you've got this thing where you're actually able to, away from the hubbub, you're actually able to talk to people a bit closer, and it brings together. I miss the smell. I'm rather sorry it's banned from pubs because that was the smell of pubs when I was going out socially when I was younger.
I think I quite like the when I've smoked a naughty trademark cigarette. It's the kind of camaraderie of who you're doing it with,
Absolutely.
or sharing a cigarette rather than having one to yourself.
Yeah.
And it sort of brings you. In my very limited experience of when I have done it, it's been a very bonding sort of friendship thing. Although the listeners are horrified by my stories.
I'm sure they're mature and kind of.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I've been offered recreational drugs twice in my life, which, considering I'm nearly 54, is actually quite amazing. Once was in 1992 by my girlfriend's friend, but I mean it was quite easy to say no to him because he was a heroin addict, and I mean he was only offering me something soft, but he was a heroin addict, and he was off his face most of the time, on something or other, and there was only one way out, one way ahead for that boy, and I understand he's no longer with us. And although I did have a life-changing experience there, but it had nothing to do with drugs. It was the other thing that's in between that and rock and roll basically. But no, I said no, and my girlfriend at the time was very angry with him for offering me. The other one was by a closer friend. I won't say who, but and she and her friend were merry on a substance, and offered me one. And I'm not anti these things, but they look so bloody ridiculous when they were smoking them. But I thought I don't need to get high to look bloody ridiculous. So I said no. And I'm always interested to hear from people that actually did, have dabbled.
The only time I've probably smoked a whole cigarette on my own was in Amsterdam when I was sharing it with Dr. Neff at the time, Charlie Gurr's friend. I don't think Charlie Gurr smokes, but it spoils his taste buds when it comes to pies. But we were in a bar, and I would be getting it handed and take a puff and pass it back, but for some reason there was somebody else in the bar that Neff wanted to speak, was either a tourist or a local who was quite an interesting conversationalist, or maybe he was a doctor, so they had something in common. Because I don't feel like I was in the conversation, whatever they were talking about, or it could have been because Neff loved Pink Floyd. It could be they were talking about Pink Floyd or about heavy metal, so I wasn't really included. So I got to the point where he wasn't reaching back for the cigarette, so I took another puff. He still didn't want it, so I took another puff, and by the time he did reach for it, there was nothing left. I smoked the whole thing, and didn't really know.
When we say drugs, I mean in most cases we are talking about hash, marijuana. Well, marijuana and cash might be the same thing.
Yeah, I mean we know so little about. I mean, well, this is the thing, and also other things I've learned is that, as I say, I was pretty late coming to alcohol in a way, not until I went to university, not until I was about nearly 19. So, I mean, I was past the age where I could have started earlier, and I was like late 20s before I ever had a spliff, or a bit of a spliff. And I've never had any other drug. I've never had ecstasy. I've never had anything, literally nothing. All the things that you heard of your peers were taking back in the 90s or in the noughties.
Well, the E's, I mean, the E's are good and everything. I mean, that the way it was presented, or the way it was it really did seem to be like a potential death sentence. But I went to, I thought, the other thing with drugs is they either come in injection form or pill form. Now, both those things I would try and avoid if at all possible.
I think if I'd have, I didn't know. I went clubbing with Callum, for goodness sake, whereas we're as conservative with a small c as possible as each other.
And me.
Chances are, if anyone had offered me it, a stranger had offered me it, I would have said no. It took it to be either my partner or a very, very close friend for a bonding thing for me to ever have done it. And I recently spoke to my friend who I know does smoke, and I said I kind of thought, he's younger than me, and I thought he probably maybe had taken other drugs at university, because I got the feeling that his crowd at university was a little bit more edgy than mine had been. And he's claimed to me, no, smoking was the only drug that he'd ever done. He hadn't tried all these other things. And so you do begin to wonder if there are more of us who haven't tried drugs than there are people there are people who
generally consider. I've as I say, Maria she's bought me, when we go to the pub together, she's bought me 2 fake fags. I've worked with fake fags before on stage, so in actual fact, much to the amusement of some of the people in the pub, I will go out with this fake fag and I'll stand there and pretend to be smoking. Because there is a frustrated smoker in me, it's the sort of theatrical in me.
I've got out into the garden with a friend who smokes and just mime smoking.
That's right, me too. Yeah, if I forget the fag, I'll just stand there with my 2 fingers.
So it makes them laugh, and then you just get on chatting, sort of thing.
And sometimes, if I'm organising my thoughts in the during the morning, when I'm walking to work, I won't just think. I'll have an avatar of something in my head, something I've seen, that's something I'll replay, like a GIF that's amused me or stimulated me. And sometimes I'll imagine I'm driving in a car, and sometimes I'll imagine I'm kind of talking that what I'm saying to myself, I'm relaying while smoking. Something like that. I've always liked smoking. I think we're just a little bit too prudish now about it. I
mean, just talking about smoking, we never had, well, with some exceptions, certainly not in our sci-fi friends, none of us smoked. None of us smoked cigarettes.
No, I mean...
It's weird that so many people came together and none of us smoked.
I mean, the other thing was when we worked on Run Fast in the World, and there's a bit behind the scenes where Renata McKinnell, who was playing the lead, is stunned that none of us drove either. I think she was just amazed nobody in our team actually driven.
I went out with a smoker, and that was a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
From the point of view of, let's go and get the train. You need to stop for a cigarette first. Yeah. I had to recalibrate, like almost say, train's coming in 10 minutes. Do you want a fag now? You had to I had to program my brain in a different way, because I'd never been with somebody where you had to stop to something, that there was a barrier to achieving something. You couldn't just walk into the cinema. You'd have to stop and have a fag before you went to the cinema.
I've been out with 2 smokers, and as long as they didn't kiss you immediately after they've smoked, I didn't mind it. It didn't bother me. Ali was. I mean, I don't. She's been around smokers, but she hasn't smoked herself, and she's sort of perhaps a bit more anti than I am. But she too believes that people should have the choice, and also this stupid thing with the dirty lungs on the. They don't give them brand names anymore. I mean, who are they? I think that's a complete and utter waste of time, an insult to the intelligence of the British public. Just bring the brands back. Don't advertise if you don't want to, but just bring the brands back, and they will buy it anyway. So why not let them enjoy the covers that they've had? It's. I always say it's the equivalent of putting the Archbishop of Canterbury on a porn mag. Sort of, who is it impressing? And I think there's a false economy to go back to. They probably won't, because they'll feel it's sort of. Doubling back on themselves, but I do like the smell of smoke. I like being around those smokers.
There was a very brief period. When I say brief period, I probably bought 1 packet before I stopped. Around 99, or I think it was around 99, I went on a week management training course with work, and it was early in the year. I think it was early 99.
Yeah,
I went, and it was down in Bournemouth. And it was one of the best weeks of my professional life, because you got 3 meals a day, lovely food, I got on quite well with people on the course. I got on quite. That was the time where we had to do a few improvisational, like, interview things.
Oh yeah.
And I got told off for being too good an actor, which sounds very... but it comes to the point where we had to take turns acting, being the boss or being the... So I just started to cry, or to pretend I was going to cry during the conversation, and the person couldn't cope with it. And I got told off that I was too convincing. Or I'd feel...
Well, yeah,
but in real life, you might encounter somebody who would...
I mean, you know...
I was only...
I always think it's absurd when you get told off being...
It was only Sutton Park good acting. I'm not Helen Mirren, for goodness sake. But, yeah, I got a couple of times, you know, rather than say to the person, yeah, I know it sort of shocked you a bit or surprised you a bit, but this could happen to you. This could be... rather than say, you know, it should have been put to the person that, well, you could encounter that. It's not. It wasn't like I stripped off naked and ran around the room. Anyway.
Also, I mean, one last thing on that. It always amuses me that people, you know, quite grown up people keep their smoking secret from the family. Even when, you know, I went to Austria with a friend of mine. I think he was 20 or I was 21, and he, you know, I knew he smoked, and we were going with his mum, and she's, you know, when we were at the check-in, and he said, you know, smoking or non-smoking, and he said non-smoking, and I turned to him and said, but I thought you... And he went, shh. And even within my family, there are people that smoke and don't tell their children, or don't tell their... you know, there are people I know who are in their late 40s.
Because I remember you saying your mum had used to smoke. My dad used to smoke in the 60s, or before the 60s.
It was the accepted norm. I mean, I remember... I probably said this before, but I remember... preschool, my mum picking me up from playgroup, and in the afternoon she'd put her feet up with have a cigarette and a cup of coffee and listen to Woman's Hour or something, or read Woman's Weekly, you know, all very quaint now, but you know, and she would have fag, and she would also. She would smoke. She would only have one a day, or if she was at home, but she would smoke. Even into the 80s, she would smoke socially. If she was out, especially work-wise, with people that smoked, she would always have a fag. I actually have one photograph of her, because my sisters-in-laws smoked, and they came round in 1981, and I've got a picture of her lit up then. But she gave up without any. We've still got some of her ashtrays, actually. She could pick it up and put it down. She wasn't all that bad for it.
But going back to my management course, because I hadn't got to the smoking bit, but so the people on the course that I was getting on to, each night we got sort of wilder and wilder, as far as half a dozen sort of servants in a hotel in Bournemouth in February can get. The first night we went to the cinema, maybe. Next night there was a pub quiz, and probably when we came back for the pub, we drunk in the bar at the hotel, and we were staying up and perhaps the group was getting smaller and smaller, and staying up quite late, considering we had to get up relatively early the next day. So a big breakfast to be had. I remember people being opening up about their sexuality, and people being quite sort of. I remember somebody saying to me, "It's been really interesting hearing you speak about this," because I think there were two gay guys in their 20s, me and one other guy, on the course, and there was somebody who probably 10 years before would have been a card-carrying homophobe, and he sort of said, "It's been really interesting hearing you talk, because I've got a face, and I kind of see all the misconceptions I had."
Absolutely.
So it was a really kind of, you know, the actual after the course stuff was equally as important as the course stuff, probably more in a way. because I've perhaps opened up. I've opened up to these people who have been total strangers.
Yeah.
Somebody on the course smoked these like cafe creme cigarillos.
Oh yes, I used to sell those,
and I quite like those because you weren't really supposed to be smoking like a normal cigarette. You were more. And they had quite a nice aftertaste, and when I had a few for this person, and then I bought my own packet when I left. And I think only a week or so after this training course, I was due to go to the Lake District with my parents and my brother, and it's actually a holiday that appears on later Sutton Park episodes when I'm up in Keswick and we're doing plot lines involving inflatable tulip, which links into something else, but we can't go there today, it's too much. But anyway, and that's actually the holiday where I came out to my brother. So that was quite a big time. But anyway, I had a packet of these cigarettes or cigarillos with me, and my mum must have found them because one day I went back to my bedroom and they were gone. And I thought, rather than say, I mean, I don't know if my brother was smoking at that point. They had enough problems with my brother smoking. Just perhaps she was like, "Oh, he's not going to start as well."
Well, you were well into your 20s by then. I mean, it was a bit.
Yeah, but in a way, a bit like it reminds me of when I started buying Spider-Man comics from the comic book shop in Salisbury, and one day the man said to me, "Haha, we've got you now. You're really hooked. You'll be inferring you'll be spending lots of money with us." And I thought, well, he's got me wrong there because I'm not hooked yet. I just bought quite a lot, and I haven't started reading them. I haven't got hooked yet, but I could see how you could get hooked. And after that, I never went back to that comic book shop.
He probably shot himself in the foot then.
And I think in the same way, I thought, well, I was quite enjoying those cigarillos, but my mum's probably right. It's the start of a slippery slope.
She had no right to take them away, though.
I know, but it probably was for the best. It probably saved me a lot of money.
But the thing is, going back to what you were saying about our lot not smoking, if we're talking purely the sci-fi fan, Joe Bunsell smoked cigars for some time. I don't know if he still does. I think he's more fitness orientated now, but he did smoke for cigars for a while.
Like my friend Milo, I didn't know he smoked because I'd only ever seen him until the last few years. I'd only ever seen him for a quick drink or a coffee, and he doesn't smoke. When he does smoke, after he's had, say, 5 pints.
Yeah.
And I'd never been that far into an evening with him. So and I saw recently that he put down that he was a smoker. I guess he is a smoker, but he's not a smoker in that he smokes in a break at work. He has to be kind of in a social situation, having had quite a few drinks.
I started my career selling cigarettes. I mean, people used to come in for their things and like roll-ups, with Rizzlers. I didn't know anything about those, and in those days you had cigarettes that were long since forgotten now, like London and Kim, and all these exotic names. I mean, maybe they're afraid that people will be lured into people will smoke whether you like it or not. I mean, you can't, if you push them further back, they'll only. Yeah, they're a bullied minority, and I think people ought to just.
I very much sort of.
Grow a pair.
I don't think a typical peer group thing would have worked for me because I never hung out with the sort of peer group that would be saying, "Here, have a fag."
Yeah. I wanted to be accepted, but there were things. I think when I was a kid, I was a little bit too uptight to do things because of my upbringing. My more conservative upbringing, I wouldn't have.
Yeah, the same here, and
dress sense was absolutely diabolical.
The times when I've gone against that have been because it was very special people who I trusted, and I thought, this will add to our friendship.
Yeah.
But I don't,
Yeah, I mean, it's like clubbing. I didn't even consider clubs until 1988 when we had a works due to Concords, which was my main club when I was during my main big clubbing years in the late 80s, early 90s. And I really enjoyed the evening, you know. I mean, I saw some people I knew. It was just lovely. And I went back there independently several times still remember it fondly.
Anyway, I think it's probably time to say goodbye to the listeners. We've still got a couple of fake words to do.
We got high on high, didn't we?
Yes, we did, yes. Well,
that was.
We've had a few revelations this episode.
Yeah.
But it just shows that
how much you can get out of.
And also how it's okay to say no, but then sometimes it's okay to say yes.
Yes,
but
in moderation,
it's just
with
the right support. I think a lot of these things are support networks, or the people who are around you.
Yes, I mean, I've there was I was sort of not anti-smoking, but I did slightly disapprove of my schoolmates smoking because we were, a couple of the people I was knocking around with were smoking at 12, and that for me was wrong. However, it was a bit double standards really, because in the Smite party days I used to supply underage people, I supply it as personally, but I used to bring booze and booze I knew that some of the underage people would like, and they would liberally smoke in my house, which was, considering my mum was a sort of, by that time, pretty redundant smoker. My dad certainly wouldn't have considered it. Wasn't really very fair on me, but fair on them. But I so wanted to be. There was a part of me that wanted to be accepted by the my peer group or that particular gang, and I just couldn't. I never quite made that breakthrough, or didn't have that kind of personality to do that, to follow it through. I became a reliable source for parties, but not actually a person you'd want to hang around with, which is what I wanted to be, and frankly what I still want to be. I still look for acceptance within some of my friends, and
every time I think we've probably done enough random word episodes, a little break, and you come back to it, and it brings something.
It brings something new. So
it's quite good to do 2 or 3 times a year, perhaps, rather than every month or whatever.
One of my favourite type of episodes, I must admit.
Okay. Well, we'll say goodbye for now, but we're going to try a couple of fake words before we say a final goodbye.
So we've done the higher, but now we're faking it.
Yes. Okie dokie, we'll be back again soon. Bye-bye for now. I don't know why do we put ourselves in the first of the possible. I've got 3 fake words. One of them is Handusnervisch, or just say Handusnervisch, Renzelbooting, or Lustran. Handusnervisch.
It all sounds like they all sound German, don't they? Handuslutic.
Handusnervisch, Renzelbooting, or Lustran. I think Renzelbooting is something like a bit. Some reason I got in my head something a bit like what do they call it? Where you go with those machines and you try to get bits of metal. Like a metal detector. So I'm going out Renzelbooting today. I'm not sure what Renzelbooting involves.
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm wondering if it's like going out, picking, going to the countryside and picking all of the things like blackberries,
the generic
stuff and maybe stuff like mushrooms, but knowing, just going out there picking fruit, picking vegetables, roots and things that you know, but you're expert enough to know, oh, yeah, you can have that mushroom, you can't have that one.
Yeah.
But the whole term for going out and just stripping the fields of natural crops is rental booting.
Hanselnervisch, I think it would be, again going back to Germany, I think it would be a very type of German whimsicality in particularly in filmmaking, early filmmaking. Hanselnerf sounds like some kind of German director, and maybe in the sort of going back to the 20s, with the tyrannical Germanic directors of the 1920s. This one was kind of had a sort of maybe silent even whimsicality or surrealism that is kind of gone. The sort of anything that emulates that or comes near to it would be Hansel Dervish.
I gotta go now. Bye. I want to go with you. Gotta go. Bye.
Goodbye, 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 goodbye.
It's been good, but yeah, definitely time to come home now.
Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Yes, goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.
Wow. Really? No kidding.
This show is part of the Pride 48 network. Find more shows over at pride48.com.
Oh dear. What's going on now? Oh, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
Let's go.
I have a voice. I have a voice.
You have a voice.
You have a voice. We have a voice.
We have a voice.
Unique voices in podcasting.
UnivazPods.net.
Okay, we've got three more. We've got Mothod Kront. We've got Hoserated, or we've got Pesty. P-E-S-D-E. I don't know how you pronounce it. Pesd.
Hoserated, the first thing that would come to bring to my mind is medieval times when you have the hose. And I suppose if hoserated, it would be if it was ill-fitting or, it was rubbing you out the wrong way. And, it would need to go back to the hose maker for refitting because it was rubbing or it was the wrong size, or which could be quite embarrassing.
I'm sort of thinking hoserated is a style maybe in ceramics where there's like a jug, a jug with a very fluted nose, or a very fluted funnel. Might be said to be hoserated, a particular style of hoserated teapots or a
particular trend.
A particular style that was very popular, and particularly where it was very fashionable to sort of to have a hoserated pint jug or something, or wine flask with a hoserated lid or something. I don't really think of anything for those other two words. Some of these words just are like a load of Scrabble. Someone's just giving you a load of Scrabble letters. I was like, no, that's not good. Yes, I think hoserated is the winner in that one from both of us. Okie dokie.
If that slime ball alien ick lays a slimy tentacle on me, I'm gonna have a fit.
I don't know, but sometimes this show is really weird.
Oh yeah, that's perfectly normal on the Shy Life Podcast. Perfectly normal. now. 20,000 episodes a month.